Hi everyone, I'm Claire from makinghandmadecards.com, and this is a little video to give you some printing tips to get the most out of your printables. Now if you're like me and you just love your crafting supplies, then you can never have enough. And for me, I really like to have variety. I like to have a huge selection of backing papers and images at my fingertips. Now I've been thinking about why that is. Why is it that us crafters like to have such a huge selection at our fingertips? Is it because we're greedy? Well, possibly, but I think moreover it's more because, if you've got lots of different backing papers and images in front of you, then it gives you more inspiration, there are a lot more creative options, and you don't feel limited by having such a small choice. I mean, let's face it, if you're a crafter, I think you can probably agree with me that crafting can become quite an expensive hobby. I know it did for me, and that kind of took the fun out of crafting at some points. Now thankfully, card making supplies have moved forward in the past few years, and you can now get multi-packs of backing papers with tags and image embellishments all bound in a little book, and it's a multi-pack of papers, so you can save money. The only thing I found was that I didn't necessarily like all the papers, so I wouldn't use them all, which meant that I'd end up wasting some money, and they'd also end up somewhere taking space in my craft supply box. The other option I had was that I could buy individual sheets, which again, very exciting because you can mix and match, but it did tend to be expensive that way. And then of course all of this stuff that I'd buy would just take up so much room. I have an already very crammed house. My house is just, it's bursting, to be honest, and my craft supplies have slowly expanded into various rooms of the house and slowly started to invade it, to be honest. I'm sure that many of you crafters can identify with that. So what I wanted to kind of do was find a way around all of this. And because I was just keeping an eye on the pennies and how much I was spending, because this hobby can become expensive, I started to feel guilty when I wanted to use a backing paper or an image or a tag from one of these booklets or individual sheets that I'd bought. I'd start to feel guilty because I'd think, it's cost me that. Do I really want to use it on this card? And, it was taking all the fun out of it, really, especially if they were one of my favourites, because I kind of wanted to keep my favourites. And they often crafters say, there's so many beautiful things that you want to buy one set just to look at and stroke and another set to actually use. But come on, that's just way too expensive. We can't do that. So, I just didn't want to feel guilty when I used a backing paper or a topper. And so that's why I turned to printables, really. Printable backing papers, printable images, and printable tags. These solved a lot of the frustrations that I had. For one, they were a lot more cost effective for me. I'd buy them once and I'd use them forever, and that's the great thing about it. You can buy a printable once and then that's it, you've got it to use again and again and again. And what's great is that as you start collecting these printable kits and your printable backing papers and toppers and sentiments and images, you actually get to grow a really huge library of printables, and you can either keep them on your computer, or you can just burn them to CD and keep them on CD and then just take out a CD whenever you want. And that for me was brilliant because all of a sudden I didn't feel guilty if I printed out a paper, and I was actually saving money in the long run. People think, but the ink, it's expensive, blah blah blah. You only print out the sheet that you want to use, as opposed to beforehand I'd go out and buy a multi-pack of papers. Great, I'd get loads of papers, but the money I'd spent on it was actually, some of it was wasted because I wouldn't use all those papers, plus those papers would be taking up room in my already crammed house. Whereas with the printables that I was using, I'd literally open up my computer and print out the sheets I'd want to print out as and when I wanted to use them. So, you don't print out every single sheet in your kit, you just print out what you want to use at that time. So when you think of it from that perspective, you're not actually wasting lots of ink, and you're actually saving on space as well, because you're literally just printing out what you need. Another thing that I started doing with the printable backing papers that I had is that I would print out just half a sheet or less just to save on ink, and I'll show you how to do that in this video. But I did have one reservation, and it was a pretty big reservation because I wanted my cards to look good. I wanted my cards to have the wow factor, basically. I wanted people to look at one of my cards and go, wow, that's stunning. And my one reservation was, can my printer really give me the quality of printouts that I need to make these stunning cards? And that spurred me on to explore just what my printer could do, and it really helped me to get the best out of my printables. Now bear in mind that today's printers can print photos, so actually the printouts are beautiful quality, and today's printers have got cheaper and cheaper, so it's affordable to get a new one. And there are lots of things that I've kind of picked up along the way that I'd like to share with you in this video. For one, my results really depended on the type of paper I used. The better quality the paper, the better quality the printout of my backing paper or tag or image or sentiment. But actually I just use inkjet paper and not photo paper. I don't think I've ever printed backing papers on photo paper. I've always used inkjet paper. I've found that's actually just done a good enough job. I do use good quality inkjet paper because you can obviously get different types of quality of paper. But having said that, I know other people who have used printables on photo paper, and of course theirs is even more stunning, to be honest. But just to let you know, you don't need to use posh paper. I just use simple inkjet paper and just make sure that the inkjet paper is of a good quality. Click on this button here, and then you go to all programs, and then you just double click on this Windows Photo Gallery here. So here we are in Windows Photo Gallery. As you can see, that's what it says here, and I've opened up sheet number 3 from the Floral Doodle kit. So if you click on this arrow next to the print and press print, I would recommend that you uncheck this if it is checked, because when you're making things larger then it's going to make the quality a little more blurred. So just make sure that this is not checked, and that means that you'll get the best quality of your backing paper. Now let me just move this along over here. Now this is a very cool feature. Okay, you might want to print out a whole backing paper, but what if you want to just print out half a sheet? Maybe you're making a small card and you just don't want to print out the whole thing. You can actually reduce this. So if you press this one, it will make it much smaller like this, and then this one here makes it slightly smaller. This one here, you see you've got lots of options here. Even smaller, and then we're getting into weeny ones here. But as you can see, that really does help you if you don't want to print out a full page like this, then go for one of these options instead. So you might say, okay Claire, that's all well and good, but I actually want to keep it this size. I just want half of the sheet. I don't want the whole thing to get smaller. Well, I've got another print tip for you, and that is to use what comes with Windows, and that is the software package called Paint. Go to all programs, and then you scroll up to accessories. Click on that once with your left mouse button, and then there's Paint. Another way to open Paint is to open up your Floral Doodle kit again, or whichever printable kit you want to open, and then right click on the file you want to print out, go down to open with, and then there's paint there. So here we are in paint, as it says there. Now this is a bit big, so all you need to do is go to View, Zoom, Custom, and just make it smaller. So let's make it 25% smaller so we can actually see. Actually, let's make it even smaller still. Let's make it 12.5%. Here we go. So we can see the whole sheet here. So all you need to do is crop this so that it will only print half of your sheet. How do you do that? Well, let me show you. So we want to crop this backing paper because we don't actually want to print out the whole thing, but we want to keep the size of the flowers and everything in it. You do that by going to this tool here, which is the Select tool. It's a little dashed rectangle. Click on that with your left mouse button, and then over here place your mouse in the top left hand corner. Then I want you to click on your left mouse button, keep holding it down and drag it out to the size you want. So I'm clicking down now with my left mouse button and I'm dragging it out. So I'd say just over half. Then let go when you're happy with the size, and then go to Image, Crop. Before you do anything, I would save this file as something else, because otherwise if you do save it accidentally, you're going to actually save over the initial file, which will be the original file, the whole sheet, and you don't really want to do that. So then you just go File, Save As, and you basically name it as, for example, you could put Floral Doodle 03 cropped or half or something like that. Save it in a place, you could save it in the same folder as your Floral Doodle kit if you want, or somewhere else, and that just means that you won't accidentally save over your large file there, because you don't want to do that. So that is your cropped file. Then all you do is print it. So you go to File, Print. That will take you to a print screen, and then you either press OK or you can fiddle about with the settings there. Speaking of which, let's have a look at the printer settings. So File, Print. So I'm going to show you a few of the things that my printer can do. It's a cheap printer. I think it cost me about £60 or £70, which is about $120 to $140. So it's not that expensive for a printer, and hopefully if I show you some of the things that you can do with my printer, you'll be able to kind of get a feeling for what your printer can do. If it's an Epson, then it might have similar way of working. If it's a different brand, then I'm sure they have similar features. If you're stuck, then you can always have a look at your printer's manual. So in order to fiddle about with these settings, you go to Preferences, and this is where you can fiddle about with the settings on your printer. So let me just show you a few of the things that you can do. First and foremost, you can choose the quality of your printout. Here, of course, it ranges from a draft quality for economical and high-speed printing to top quality photographic printing. Now, as you can imagine, the further you move up this chain, the more ink you use, but then the better the quality as well. Obviously, if you're a complete die-hard crafter, then you'd probably go for a photo setting or best photo setting. But what I'm trying to say is you don't necessarily have to go for that, because I usually print it on that, and once accidentally I printed it on draft and it came out fine. But as I say, that might just be my printer. The next thing you should choose is the type of paper, because the printer will print differently depending on the type of paper that you use. So as I mentioned before, I just use plain inkjet paper, just a good quality inkjet paper, but you can also use all sorts of different things. Glossy paper, for example, here, you know, semi-gloss, and then of course the size of your paper. Now the printables from makinghandmadecards.com are set to print on this size, but you can actually choose any size paper you want, and this is where you would change to a US sized paper. Just select it down here. You can't see it, but it comes up down here. This part actually asks you which way you'd like your printer to print things out. Now the printables on makinghandmadecards.com are always set to print for a portrait orientation, so just make sure that that is checked. Let's go to the advanced tab on here. Now depending on the ink you use and your printer, you'll find that sometimes some colours don't print out as vividly as the others, and if you're having problem with contrast, or if you're finding that one colour is duller than the other, then just play about with this. This is the colour management part. For example, you can make things brighter, or if you find that on your screen something has a real contrast, you know, like the background might be a lot lighter and the foreground might be a lot darker, but when it comes to your printout you can't really see the difference, then try playing about with the contrast, the brightness. And then for example, if you find that you don't have enough yellow, for example, in your printout, then just move that over to the plus side, or you might find that they're all a little bit too bluey green, so you might move the cyan and the yellow to the negative side. Just play around, and if you're worried about using too much ink, then just print out a smaller version like I showed you in Windows Photo Gallery. That would be just fine. Let's go to the page layout tab now. Now this is cool. This is one of my favorite features, because basically you can tell it to print half the size here as well. You remember in Photo Gallery where we could choose if we wanted to print it for half the size or a quarter of the size? Well, actually you can do it here as well in your printer settings. If you click multi-page, here you go, and pages per sheet 2, and that's what would happen. 4, then it would print a quarter of the size, and you can keep going up or down. That's a really cool feature. Of course, you've got to remember that it's going to be reducing the whole thing. For example, on the floral doodle kit, if you want to keep the flowers at the same size, you need to go into paint like I showed you, and you need to crop it and then print it out. But if you're quite happy with just having the whole sheet shrunk, then this option of using the Windows Photo Gallery is fine. Now before we finish this tutorial, I'd also like to take you to the maintenance, because it is very important to look after your printer. For example, which ink cartridges should you use? Should you stick to the branded ink cartridges that your printer manufacturer recommends, or should you just go for cheap ink? Well, that's up to you. I have actually tried both versions. I have one printer where I use cheap ink, and I have another printer where I just use the Epson ink. And I can safely say that the printed sheets that come out where I use the Epson branded ink, I have to admit, they are better quality, especially if you print it on good quality inkjet paper or photo paper. Having said that, I have printed out using cheaper ink on my other printer, and if you are willing to fiddle about with the colour management, which is here, then yeah, you can get some good printouts. To be honest, it's up to you, and I can't remember the ins and outs of it, but I remember reading somewhere that if you use ink that is not by the brand, then you're not covered for warranty or guarantee or something. I don't know if that's for all the main manufacturers, or I don't know, but just make sure before you put a non-branded ink cartridge in your printer that you read through, just to make sure you know what you're actually getting yourself into, really. The other thing I want to show you is these things. These basically look after your printer. For example, after you've printed quite a few sheets out, you might find that you're starting to get lines through your printout, or it's just not looking too good. It looks like the printer might be kind of clogging up. Just go for something like head cleaning. So if you click on that, let me just click on that and I'll show you. And it says click start to clean the print head nozzles. Only clean the print head when its faint areas or gaps appear in your printout. And basically that will clean your printer heads for you, and hopefully after that it should be fine. You might have to do it a couple of times. I've had to do it a couple of times, sometimes one after the other, but usually it does the job. And of course there's the head alignment as well, and the nozzle check. And if you want to just check how much ink you've got left, then this is the one that you use. My printer's not actually on, but usually it would show you how much ink you have here. So I really hope that you found this video helpful. Getting to grips with your printer really help you to get the best out of your printables, and basically it just opens up a whole new world. You know, you can start collecting printables, you can get a huge library on your computer or on CD-ROMs at your fingertips, and you know, you'll have all of this creative inspiration, all of these creative options. And the great thing about it is that it's guilt-free. You know, once you've got the printable kit, that's it. You can use them again and again and again. So you can actually print out your favorite sheets without feeling guilty, and knowing that you can go back and print out 1, 2, 3, 4 more copies if you want, even more, and you know, you can keep going. So I really hope that this little video really kind of spurs you on to not be afraid of your printer. Go and explore it, see what you can do. If you find that the colours on your printouts aren't as bright or as balanced as you want, then play around with those settings that I showed you. If you don't have an Epson, then I'm sure they've got something similar. And good luck and happy card making.